What up, y'all? This is Shakesha, a.k.a. Black Diamond in the Rough, a.k.a. Schnizzle for Rizzle, a.k.a. the Big Girl, a.k.a. your girl. Let's do this. Shakesha and the White Boy.
I feel good today.
Welcome, Shakesha and the White Boy. I am your host, Ryan Dinger, out here putting the white in White Boy. And as always, I can't believe I wrote that. And as always, I am joined by my co-host. She is a script writing, film producing, web series directing, all-around badass, and she actually just produced a music video. She is the smart and talented Shakesha Williams. Flam, 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 flam.
What it do, son? What it do? How are you today?
How's it going, Shakesha?
It's going, man.
We don't have a budget for like party horns, so I'm just gonna do that periodically.
I'm with you on
Flam,
that.
flam, flam, flam.
I never knew how to like write that word down. Firm.
There it is. Now you know. That's what I'm bringing to the table.
Accurate portrayal
as we do this.
of the air horn. Bring it back.
How are you? How's your weekend
good.
going? We're here doing a weekend sesh. It's a little different.
Yeah, it actually feels good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel a bit more rested.
Yeah.
Anything funny happened this week? Any good stories?
Are we talking about personal?
Yeah, tell me what you got. Tell me what you
Nothing
got.
funny this weekend other than, ran out of laundry detergent and started rubbing jeans with the fabric wipes.
Oh, man.
Until we ran to the store.
Those are
That's a
dark times.
That's a funny story.
Were these your own clothes or?
It was a riff, like a little bit of this, little bit of that.
Yeah.
Little mashup.
Yeah.
But we went. We
That's the
made
big
it
news
better.
for the week.
Yeah, man.
Laundry.
Nothing. I did get accepted to a film festival for two
Oh
of my
yeah!
projects.
Congratulations. Let's
So
talk
that's
about
dope.
That. Which
yeah,
film festival?
It's called the Widescreen Festival. It's happening in Las Vegas in September. I'm super excited about that. Shout outs to the cast and crew and Reflections film series. It's really awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. CGR
Yeah.
continuing to blow up, guys.
Come
If you haven't
on.
watched it yet, you should. It's really good. It's on It's on
Vimeo.
Vimeo is where I watched it.
And yes, it's called Curvy Girls Rock Digital Series. So
Nice.
yeah, shout out.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You're making moves.
Trying, baby, trying.
So we're back. This is I feel like you and I have both talked about it. We don't really like listen to podcasts a lot.
Yeah.
So this is kind of new for us. So I've been listening to podcasts more to sort of just get a sense of like what other people are doing like as we go through this process. And I feel like right now Shakesha and the White Boy is in the listen to two people learn how to make a podcast stage.
We are certainly
So
in
now
that
what we're doing right now is
vein.
the small talk portion in the beginning of every episode where you get to know the hosts a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? So
Deconstruct
film festival
us.
for you. The big news for me this week is I got really into Billie Eilish, who is
Really?
Yeah, I was really I wouldn't say really surprised, but people have been talking about her to me for a while. I'm a huge music fan. I'm a musician myself.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
decided to give old Billie a listen, and
what is your takeaway?
I'm kind of feeling it, and I was thinking like, it's funny because I feel old sometimes listening to her. There's some stuff that I'm like, oh, that's a little strange, but in general, I really liked it. But I was thinking, with like the Sonic movie that's coming out next year, but like all these reboots that have been happening, there's always this like childhood ruined mentality on the internet. Like people are really upset. And I was thinking like my experience with Billie Eilish, who is very much like Gen Z, she's only 17, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's super, super young.
Oh my God.
But my experience with her has been like, I'm mostly out of the like mainstream zeitgeist at this point, right? But actually for a brief period this week, I took a step back in, and it's almost like instead of childhood ruined, I'm like childhood extended?
Rediscovered.
Or rediscovered. So that's fun. Yeah, it's always cool to find new music. And
What's your like recommendation? Which song did you like?
Man, so like Bad Guy is like the big single that everyone is listening to, and I like the music video a lot for that song. The song itself is okay. My favorite is, I think I like My Strange Addiction a lot. It's a good song. And I Wish You Were Gay is also a good one. So,
Spotify.
On Spotify, yeah. Her new album's out right now. So I don't know why we're giving Billie Eilish free press,
you know
but
what?
whatever, man.
I love
It's good.
when artists you get their due.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout out Tank and the Bangers because they're like
yes.
they're my faves right now.
They're so good, yeah.
And of course Lizzo. So shout outs to folks who've been grinding for a minute and now getting their just due. Yeah.
So we made a promise when we started doing this that we were going to keep episodes nice and short and tight. So we're gonna
minus the short.
Get right into the next thing. So as always, we start with a little segment we like to call WTF.
What? Fuck. What the fuck? What the fuck, Richard? What the fuck?
All right, so today's WTF is regarding a gentleman by the name of Aiden Cook. I found this on Twitter. Lois Beckett, at Lois Beckett with 2 T's, said, I asked Aiden Cook, and I'll give you everything surrounding it in a minute, but I asked Aiden Cook, an animal rights activist who jumped onto the stage to interrupt Kamala Harris, if he had considered the optics of literally taking the microphone from women of color. I did, he said. I tried to show my profound respect for each of the people on stage. And if you don't know, this was yesterday. Kamala Harris and 2, I think it might have been 3 other women, including a moderator, were talking about wage disparities and gender disparities for women and women of color. And in the middle of their discussion, this gentleman, Aiden Cook, man bun and all, very hipster in his appearance, jumped on stage, snatched the mic from Kamala Harris, and began a rant. For just to play devil's advocate, he wasn't necessarily, according to Mr. Cook, he wasn't against Ms. Harris in any way. He just felt that it was a great way to promote or to talk about or to ask questions about things surrounding animal rights. The issue is that a white man snatching a microphone from a black woman, as a matter of fact, a stage filled with women, is very problematic to so many of us. Yeah. And the fact that he said he tried to show his profound respect for each of the people, it's like he's a little bit disconnected from the optics.
Yeah, it's, I mean, he says he considered them, but certainly that was my first thought. And Shakesha's rolling her eyes right now.
I am so rolling my eyes.
That was my first thought, too, is I saw this headline, and we actually had both seen this story before we started today. And, my first thought was, what's this dude look like? And, he was pretty much exact. He's an animal rights activist, which is definitely a notable, worthy cause for sure. Respectable. But I mean, he's as white as me, maybe even whiter.
A little bit.
It's kind of hard to do actually. Very very long beard, man bun. Which the man bun I thought went out a while ago. Not that we need to get hung up on his lips.
Aiden is keeping the bun alive.
Yeah, the optics are not great, man. It's like I think that there's something to be said about wanting to have these conversations with representatives.
Yes.
And far be it from me to tell someone that they shouldn't reach out to their representative for issues that are important to them.
Yes.
But I think that there are instances or there are appropriate ways in which you should do that, and going on stage and literally interrupting and taking the mic from a black woman, and I don't know if you know this or not, Shakesha, there's actually not a huge amount of black women in politics.
I've seen something like that, yes.
So, it's a minority voice.
Absolutely.
In an area where they're not very prominent, we'll say. So yeah, you gotta think that's not a great look.
Well, what I'll say is that I didn't see him at a Trump rally doing this. Because let's just be honest, he'd have got knocked the fuck out had that happened.
If he had taken the mic from
If
Trump?
he wouldn't have even gotten that far on stage. Well, he is president. That's number one.
Sure.
But, and according to people who were at the rally, there was security. However, it ended up Kamala's husband and a couple of other men had to take his ass out. Yeah,
I did see that, Kamala's husband. That's the other thing is, like, what is the security at this event? Like, he got on stage and was able to come and physically take the mic from her. What if he had worse intentions? Like, how are you letting a public event like this, and it was a Move On event, and Move On, full disclosure, is a movement that I'm a part of, that I have donated to. So, full disclosure, but Move On, you got to do better with security at your events, guys. Like, you can't, how are you letting someone get up on stage?
Shout outs to the ladies who, after he was removed, gathered themselves together and kept the conversation going. I'm sure they were a little bit unnerved, but overall they handled themselves with dignity, class, and no bitterness whatsoever.
So what was this dude's name? Aaron what?
Aiden Cook.
Aiden. I called him Aaron before. Oops.
Aiden Cook.
Aiden Cook. What the fuck, man? What the fuck?
That wasn't planned, y'all. That's just our opinion.
What? Fuck. What the fuck? What the fuck, Richard? What the fuck?
All right, Shakesha, so that's another rousing edition of What the Fuck. But that brings us now to our main topic for today. And today, we're talking about cultural appropriation. And it's going to be an interesting conversation because I think that there are a lot of misunderstandings, perhaps, or there's not a lot of clarity about what is and isn't cultural appropriation, what's cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation among white people, to be honest. I mean, we haven't had to think about these conversations for most of our history, and it's important that we have them now. Mm-hmm. But what got us started on this topic is we started talking about Bruno Mars, actually. And last year, there was a whole conversation about whether Bruno Mars was a cultural appropriator or not. And there was actually a writer, activist, and YouTuber named Seren Sensei, and she went viral for this rant she went on about how Bruno Mars is a cultural appropriator. That's her point of view. Mm-hmm. And so her quote here is, "He is not black at all, and he plays up his racial ambiguity to be able to cross genres and go into different places. Bruno Mars has an Album of the Year Grammy. Prince never won an Album of the Year Grammy. So how are you going to say that people who are originators in the funk genre, originators in R&B, New Jack Swing, Bobby Brown, and New Edition don't have no Album of the Year Grammy? Bruno Mars got that Grammy because white people love him because he's not black, period. The issue is we want our black culture from non-black bodies, and Bruno Mars is like, I'll give it to you." So that's a pretty powerful quote, I think an interesting quote. I can't believe Prince never won an Album of the Year.
I am very
I looked it up, and it's true. He's won Grammys, but never Album of the Year.
Wow.
That was
not
very
even Purple Rain.
No, he did win 3 Grammys for Purple Rain. I don't remember which ones they were, but not Album of the Year.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting, I feel like. But we talked about Bruno Mars and had this conversation, and I think we kind of both agreed we don't really think that Bruno Mars is a cultural appropriator.
Yeah.
She says this thing, and I mean, we need to preface this with my point of view on this. I'm a white person, so this conversation, my point of view in this conversation is not as weighted as someone who is on the negative end of cultural appropriation, right? So that's clearly something that needs to be said.
Well, to be fair, I do wear a blonde wig from time to time, so.
I actually. I've heard that. That's,
so to be fair, maybe, but there are blondes in Africa too.
That's what I was gonna say. I've heard that that's actually not a white thing.
Oh wow. Okay, so I'm not an appropriator.
No, no, but I have heard people say that. I've seen people say that online as some some sort of like whataboutism.
Yeah.
But
that was a joke, y'all. By the way.
yes, be clear that was a joke. I guess my thing is like I do agree with her point that I think in general, white people want to experience black culture. Well, historically, they've wanted to experience black culture from non-black bodies or from white people. I think is more accurate, and I don't really think that Bruno Mars passes as white.
No. Well, okay, so here's my take. I grew up in New York, specifically Harlem, Bronx adjacent. And for me, I've lived around so many races who, for all intents and purposes, you can say, acted black. So years ago when, what's his name? Why is Bruno Mars stuck in my head? What's the little guy? Murder. Oh, Ja Rule. When Ja Rule and Jennifer Lopez came out with I'm Real, there was like a huge thing because Jen said nigga.
Okay.
But for me, growing up in Harlem and the Bronx, I understood that Puerto Ricans said that.
Right.
All the time. And a lot of us, you know, it was really integrated. So I understand the idea of why people would be upset who did not get or understood that kind of microcosm of New York and the Bronx and how we all interrelated in that way.
Right.
But I also know, you know, you always know a white Mike, you know, it's a white dude who grew up around black people. It's always white Mike. Don't know why he's always white Mike, but it's always a dude named Mike, and we go, oh, white Mike. And white Mike knew better.
Yeah.
White Mike never said that, though.
Right,
Mike might have taken on, you know, he might date some black girls, he might have loved rap music. He might even DJ'd, but he never said the N-word, because he know he'd get his ass beat.
Right.
So for that reason, I understand why people say, well, you know better. Like, you know that we can't take that on the road that way. What I will say about Bruno Mars is that he has so many, like, he's Jewish and Filipino. And people who are Filipino are often of mixed, like, you have very light-skinned, fair Filipinos who put you in the mind of Chinese people, and you have black Filipinos like, is it Apple D App from the Black Eyed Peas?
Well, so actually, Bruno Mars is not Filipino. I actually looked this up, and he is Puerto Rican.
He's Puerto Rican, but his mom is like Philippine or something.
Ashkenazi Jewish descent. So
that's his mom.
Originates from Ukraine and Hungary. So he actually is
Puerto Rican,
half white, I guess. But I don't. You know, like we were saying, I don't really think he passes as white. I had assumed that he was Latino or Latinx rather.
Yeah, I did too. That's what I thought.
So, but I guess the other thing, and we talked about Bruno, and I think the other thing, the point that I look at for him, the nuance of it is that he is using black musicians in his band. He doesn't make any bones about who his influences are.
Yeah.
And I think that for me as a musician myself, we kind of look at it like, you know, if you can play, you can play. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter what your background is. Of course, it's easy for me as a white person to say that again. And, you know, I'm thinking in an ideal world because I don't have to deal with the conditions around appropriation and all of that. Right?
I think, so if we're talking about music, it hasn't been problematic that white musicians appreciate and or play music that was had traditional African or Latin roots. The problem has been that kind of appropriation was often financial appropriation. You know, straight up stealing a record, putting it on the charts and reselling it and repackaging it. Right. So that has always been the big issue. It's never been that, you know, because like you say, if you're a musician, if you dope, you dope. Right. And if we're to be completely honest, black music or music from African culture is kind of the basis of American music.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, country, which is in the 21st century, country is as white as it gets. Oh, don't go too fast.
Slow down, Ryan. Take your time. I want to get there.
But it's the truth.
We're going to get into Lil Nas X real quick.
You're right. And no, we don't even, I mean, we can definitely talk about that.
That's definitely an appropriation talk because people are in their feelings.
Oh yeah.
In their feelings.
But, you know, country is based on blues music. And country in the 21st century, Lil Nas X aside, is very much a white art form. It's definitely had roots in black music, but it's become a white genre of music, I would say.
Right.
So to your point, like the basis of basically all American music is black.
Yeah.
You know, is from that culture. You know, when slavery it started in the fields there with blues and everything.
Tell him, my brother.
It's the truth, you know? It's the truth. And certainly I think as a white person, I have a responsibility to recognize that and to talk about, you know, even though there were white musicians who I loved growing up, they were still pulling from black musicians. So that influence and noting that and always being aware of it. But I don't like the idea, and I'm not saying that Sensei is saying this necessarily, but the idea of like you need to fit into these categories of like you're only playing music from the culture that you were raised in is sort of weird to me. And Sensei actually addressed this herself in a later interview where she's talking about that quote that went viral, that clip that she had. And she said, she said, I said this in a panel in the full clip. A lot of the time we think about cultural appropriation, especially here in the United States, in terms of this black-white dichotomy. When you start bringing in non-black persons, this is not part of the quote, but like Bruno Mars, of non-black persons of color, it gets a little bit more murky and muddy about what's okay and what is not okay.
Gotcha.
And I guess that's kind of where we are, is like, what is the line between, and we can talk about more than just music. It can be in film, it can be in art, it can be in anything.
So interestingly enough, I'd come across a Refinery 29 video, and it was these Japanese women who are now like into Chola culture. If anyone, for those who don't know, Cholas are folks of Mexican or Latin descent who primarily live in the West Coast. And when I was growing up, Cholas wore like the heavy eye makeup with the plaid shirts, and the lowrider culture was surrounding all of that. And they actually are pretty freaking dope. I understand why they would want to take that on. And women in the 90s like Brandy and Janet Jackson and a lot of other, even Gwen Stefani, put that stuff in their videos. And it was sort of a celebration to, one, the West Coast, and two, to how like fucking fly and dope that look is. But to the persons, to some people, it is an appropriation because they don't understand all that culture is about. So it's not just about the clothes. It's not just about the lowriders. For the women, who are now tanning to make themselves darker or dyeing their hair, is it appropriation? And let me just read what this one writer, her name, or his name is Walter Thompson Hernandez. And let's see, it says, I grew up in Southeast Los Angeles, the son of an African-American father and Mexican mother, and the concept of identity is a theme that has been central to my life and a thread that weaves through many of my stories. I heard a rumor that lowrider culture, a community with an affinity for cars, outfits with intricate design, multicolored lights, and heavily tinted windows that can be traced in Southern California to as far back as the 1940s, had traveled to Japan. Apparently, a Japanese journalist came to Los Angeles in the early 90s to cover a lowrider event, returned to Japan with photos and stories to share. And he goes on to say, what I found when I got there is that while most instances of cultural appropriation completely disregard the original communities, the people whom I met did the exact opposite. They are in constant communication with Los Angeles lowrider communities. To me, it is more of a form of cultural exchange. Although many people I met in the scene were born and raised in Japan, they pride themselves on appreciating lowrider culture while also creating something new and adding their own touches through their own cultural experiences, which is the best of, he called it cultural exchange. Some people call it cultural appreciation, but the reason he called it cultural exchange is because they're living it and also staying in contact with the originators.
Okay.
And that's the best of. So that for me is why I feel like Bruno Mars isn't necessarily cultural appropriating.
Right.
If you're talking about decade appropriation, he appropriated the shit out of the 90s.
Well, and like
we want our 90s back.
And the 70s before it,
and
right?
Right. Well, more like the 50s and like the 50s with the doo-wop looks that he was doing.
But I was thinking Motown.
No,
but yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
he's appropriated a lot of eras, I'd say. Like he has, though. He's been like... Because he sort of came out with just like... what sounded like when did that song came out? I'll catch a grenade for you. That had to be like 2005.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like that was his first hit, and that was like just very much of that moment.
Exactly.
You know, but then he did the doo-wop stuff, and now he is doing the super 90s. Like he's freaking doing Poison.
He loves his decades
so hard. Like if you listen to that song, it's Poison. The song he did with Cardi B, Finesse.
Absolutely.
But I guess like so, you know, it's putting you on the spot a little bit. But like, what are some good examples of people who are like, or like performers or artists who have gone across cultural boundaries and have done it well? Like, are there people out there who you feel like are actually? I can think of people I know who aren't doing it well, but like, who are some people who are actually?
So at the end of the day, so if I'm digging into crates now, but for me, there have been artists who brought light to a culture without giving the culture its due, but also supporting that culture. And I'll for instance, the ball culture of the 80s and 90s, Madonna, when she brought Vogue to the stage, to the mainstream. Voguing was done by these. If you haven't watched it, please watch Paris is Burning. Mm-hmm. It basically covers ball culture and how Black and brown queer folk had basically been turning shit out since the 40s.
You know, it's. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah.
It's just funny. I was just listening to another podcast, actually, Reply All, which is a podcast just about like internet culture in general, and they talk about the word yas and where that comes from, and it dates back to Paris is Burning, and now it's a phrase that is super mainstream and used everywhere, but it actually was from the drag scene that they talk about in that documentary.
And a lot of particularly Black and brown queer people have been appropriated in aces and spades, and these people, you know, they were poor and broke and disenfranchised and being thrown out by their parents and making their own families, and a lot of them at that time were dying of AIDS, and you know, so and now it's more mainstream. Even the camp theme that happened at the Met Gala recently is sort of, a lot of people paid homage to that time. So when Madonna came out with Vogue, she some of the dancers who were a part of the scene, of the ballroom scene, actually went on tour with her.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
One of the legends, I think his name, please forgive me, y'all, Louis Extravaganza.
Uh-huh.
He was like the man on the ball scene.
Okay.
And basically the father of the House of Extravaganza. I don't know why I had to say it like that. It just felt right.
I'm looking up Louis Extravaganza
right now.
And
you know, Billy Porter is now. Shout outs to Ryan Murphy, who brought Pose. Some people were looking for an issue when Pose was about to come out, but Janet Mock is not only a writer but also an executive producer, and I think between her and Ryan Murphy, that is him. Yes, yes, he is the one in the front. Yes, honey.
Yes,
yes, baby. So between Janet Mock, who is a transgender African American woman, and Ryan Murphy, who's a queer white man and bad to the motherfucking bone, they created Pose. And like I said, people were like, well, this is nothing but Paris is Burning. But once we saw the actual show, even though it's really glamorized,
sure.
It really paid homage. It wasn't a ripoff. You didn't feel like you were. So I think they did it right. Okay. And like I said, even though Madonna basically, you know, she paid her bills off the ballroom scene, she showed, she paid homage to it in that she brought some of the kids with her to travel. So I think those are good uses. But at the same time, there are people who are just queer folks or people who are Black and brown faces and bodies who are doing this work and don't get seen.
Yeah.
And because you add like a Ryan Murphy to it, it becomes explosive. Or you add Madonna's name to it, it becomes explosive.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
so
that's a bigger topic.
So, like, in that sense, Madonna was using her privilege as, like, a white pop performer who was a superstar to give an opportunity to people who were in this underground scene.
I wouldn't say give an opportunity, but she knew that it's just like, just for instance, within appropriation, there's sometimes appropriation within appropriation. So Beyonce had dancers. She was trying to recreate a dance by these two gentlemen from Africa.
Okay.
No one could teach it to her. So they had to literally go and find these guys, bring them to the States, and have them teach it to her, which is something artists now have accessibility to things that they wouldn't have had years ago. Somebody would have had to go scout. And because of the internet, it's just ready for you. Yeah. But no one could teach her those dance moves from Run the World. Is it Girls or Who Run the World? I don't know the name of the song.
It's Get in Formation, right?
No,
it's sorry.
Who Run the World, Girls. I think it's Girls. I'll say Who Run the World. So because everyone will know what I'm talking about. But for that video, they had to fly those guys in. And they had to teach her. There were language barriers. Yeah, there were language barriers and everything. So imagine you're just a guy, from Africa, and you're just partying, hanging out, doing your thing, and you put your video up. They didn't even, when they were introduced to Beyonce, they didn't even know who she was.
Wow.
They were like, she was like, "Hi, my name is Beyonce." They were like, "Oh, nice to meet you."
That's like living in another reality.
That's living in a whole other reality, but they were bad. Like, they are amazing dancers.
Awesome.
Amazing dancers. So there's appropriation within that.
Sure. But I mean, I guess, is that appropriation though? Like, if you're actually going to the originators of the dance,
they weren't going to at first though. No one was able to teach her the steps outside. Oh,
I see what you're saying. So they
were trying to learn
people.
It. Yeah, they were. They her choreographers, her mainstay choreographers were like, we not going to be able to do this.
Nobody's perfect, even Queen Bey, but
please don't say that on this show. We get shut down.
Yeah, the Beehive.
The Beehive will come in and take our equipment as we speak.
But she did end up doing what was right.
Absolutely.
I guess for me, the takeaway there is, she should just go on to them in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than looking for someone else to try and...
I'm actually glad it worked out that way. In that, you can just learn things on the internet, but for those kids, you've changed their lives in so many ways. Yeah. So those, to me, are really great examples of appropriation. And Lil Nas X, shout out to him.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. That's a moment right now. And, like it's funny because... Lil Nas X, if you don't know, he does Old Town Road, and I don't know how you're listening to a podcast without knowing what that song is, because it's all over the internet.
I can't no more.
My niece and nephews friggin' love that song, and they're all under 12, and they dig it.
You know why, Ryan? Because can't nobody tell me nothing.
I mean, it's good. It's definitely good. I wouldn't say that I'm like throwing it on all the time, but I'm also not like...
It's not Let It Be.
Yeah, if it comes on, I'm like...
It's not Thriller.
Yeah. But what's funny is, there are white people now who I feel like are getting upset because they're like, dude, this is a black man doing a country song. Mm-hmm. But... country, as we talked about before, it's you're almost going full circle there, because country is based on blues, which is started with black people and
black roots.
And another thing that I actually only learned recently, there were black cowboys, and like that was like a thing too. You never see that in pop culture, right?
Absolutely.
You never see a black cowboy, but it was absolutely a thing that existed.
It was real.
And like, so
they still exist.
Yeah, well, it still exists. Yeah, it's weird to me to think I'm an East Coast guy,
Right. No, like the only reason Cowboys, I knew is because growing up, they used to have a black rodeo that came to Harlem.
Wow.
They may still do it. I don't know, but
that's pretty cool.
That's how I knew about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like.
But the tales that we've been told, it's more of the same. Mm-hmm. That the idea of people of color, whether they black or brown, are cowboys, is not a part of, because cowboys were the good guys and they were the badasses.
Yeah. So the people of color were the Native Americans in those.
Right. Always the villain.
Yeah.
So the
savages.
And if you're counting Tonto, he was the sidekick. So
right.
Yeah.
He was like the Uncle Tom of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
He was like fucking with the cowboys, but I mean. Yeah, I don't know. I think like, especially in the 21st century, for me, I feel like so much art in this century is about mashing a bunch of things that came before you together to make
Yeah.
something new. Everything under the sun has been done, right? So like what
Absolutely.
you need to do is pull from the genre. Like for me personally, is I love all genres of music, and I know people say that all the time and like they don't really mean it, but like outside of like arena country, there's pretty much like I can find something that I'll enjoy in pretty much any genre, and I like applying that when I'm making my own music. And I think that artists should definitely be free to do that. But what it sounds like you're saying, and I think it is probably the right answer about what is appreciation versus appropriation, is like trying to find people to collaborate with who are actually part of the cultures that you love, and paying tribute to the artists that come before you. I grew up, and Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin is he was a fairly big influence on me. I still like Led Zeppelin to this day, but I found out when I was an adult that Jimmy Page was, and he said this in interviews, well after the fact, after they had already been famous and established, but that Freddie King was the biggest influence on him. And Freddie King was a blues musician who started in the 50s. He actually had a career of 20 years into the 70s.
Yeah.
And then I started listening to Freddie King, and now like when I think about like who actually influenced my guitar style, I think more about Freddie King than I did about Jimmy Page, because I actually found my way to like who was actually originating that sound, and like doing that work to sort of find like the origins of the things that you love that you find influential.
Right.
I think that's important too.
So
like
not be lazy and just accept it for face value, but dig deeper and really figure out what it's all about.
Yeah, and if you're going to be a good artist, you need to do that anyway. You need to do that work to understand the basis of what it is you're doing. Every form of art has been done before, and that means that you're always going to be standing on the shoulders of giants, right? You're always with the people who came before you. So go learn about them. And learn about them, step outside of the circles that you're usually in and try and learn about people who maybe you wouldn't have heard about it before. It literally took me asking someone. I had always heard Led Zeppelin, was stealing from black artists and stuff, and that was like a well-known fact. And finally, one day in my early 20s, I thought I should ask someone who those artists were, and someone mentioned Freddie King to me, and that's how I found out. Like it was this active process of trying to find, who it was who had influenced these guys who I idolized growing up. And, I think that's what it's about. Like, you got to dig in on the art and ask questions. Yeah. Because people, have been, they've been doing this a long time. So someone's going to be able to tell you about something that you don't know about.
I mean, if we're going to talk about that, are we going to add Post Malone? Because I know people find him problematic.
Well, he's doing the opposite, right? He's doing the opposite because he's not outwardly like he doesn't dive into like social issues with relating to people of color today. Right. He very much stays out of that fray, even though he's very clearly using hip hop to build a platform for himself, and that's kind of like the problem, right? Hip hop
speaks directly to what you're saying. Like if you want to do it, then.
Yeah, Post Malone, man, I mean, I think we could do an entire episode yelling about him, or maybe just a WTF, but I don't know.
Yeah, I feel this way, that because we talked a lot about artistry and music, because usually influences do come in those mediums, music and film and television. So I think as long as there's some sort of ode and homage paid, it's okay. I mean, I had Asian inspired like outfit, and I was like, I felt really weird about it. Like, am I going too far? But I think Chinese and Japanese culture, and particularly their fashion, is beautiful. So it wasn't for me like I was trying to like do anything that would be appropriated, but I'm still like, oh, am I doing too much? Is the bun too high? Should I do the sticks? Do I go all out, or so even I've struggled with where the line is. So I don't know. My white brothers and sisters gotta get it together though.
Oh,
as long as I have to think about wearing braids to work,
think about it.
But if it's on the runway, it's fashion. So as long as I have to think about wearing braids to work, or for that matter, my natural hair, we got a lot to talk about. That's a wrap for today's episode. Before we bid you adieu, here's another friendly reminder that we're doing a mailbag segment. Any question you may have on any topic, send it our way and we'll discuss it. You can send your questions to Shakesha and the White Boy at gmail.com. That is all one word. And for those of you who don't know, Shakesha is spelled Shakesha. Our intro music was written and produced by Berberock. You can find more of his music by visiting berberock.com or on your preferred streaming service. That is Berberock, BRBRCK.com. And please, if you haven't done so already, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at SATWB1. Ryan, anything you'd like to add?
That's all I got. Another episode in the can.
That's what's up.
Follow us on social media.
You better.